Put your head up, play!
Jojo, živijo, lep pozdrav vsem, upam, da ste dobro. Jaz sem Matej, ker je pogovor s Kirkom Hendersonom prejšnji teden naletel na zelo dober odziv in smo dobili komentarje, da bi radi slišali še kakšen pogovor z ameriškim poznavalcem NBA scene in seveda tudi konkretno dogajanja v ozadju Dallas Mavericksov. Smo tokrat pripravili, mislim, da zanimiv pogovor, ki bo vreden vašega časa in poslušanja, in sicer z Majkom Bibinsom, urednikom svoje športne spletne strani, podcasterjem. Mike je popularen tudi na Mavs Twitterju. Najdete ga lahko na @bibscorner, več o tem tudi v samem pogovoru z Majkom, ki ima zanimive poglede na to, kako lahko Mavericksi zopet pridejo v pozicijo in koliko časa bodo seveda potrebovali za to, da pridejo v to pozicijo, ko se bodo lahko zopet resno borili za naslov prvaka. Kdaj se bodo Mavericksi zopet borili za naslov prvaka, tudi o tem sva več spregovorila z Majkom. Med samim podcastom pa sva izvedela tudi, da Carlisle ne bo vodil moštva na tekmi z Knicksi, zato sva spregovorila tudi o Carlislu in tem, ali so morda tudi na trenerskem stolčku potrebne kakšne spremembe, ali so te spremembe potrebne v vodstvu moštva in ali lahko Mavericksi sploh posežejo po naslovu brez teh sprememb. Torej, ali so morda potrebne kakšne bolj globoke strukturalne spremembe v samem moštvu, preden bodo zopet konkurenčni. Res sva imela poglobljeno debato o tem, na koncu pa je beseda tekla tudi o drugem delu sezone, Majkovih pričakovanjih za drugi del in samo končnico, kako daleč lahko Mavericksi letos posežejo, in pa MVP bitki, se lahko Luka še vmeša v boj za MVPja in kdo so Majkovi favoriti. Tudi o tem več v samem pogovoru. Preden pa začnem, bi vas pa samo na hitro zaprosil, vam zatežil, če nam lahko pomagate s tem, da ta posnetek všečkate in se naročite na naš YouTube Sport Info.si kanal, ali pa to storite na tisti platformi, kjer nas poslušate, Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, povsod smo seveda dosegljivi in seveda tudi hvaležni za vsako naročnino, všeček in pa tudi komentarje, zanimive komentarje, ki jih puščate, tudi teh smo seveda zelo veseli. Tako, preden pa zares začnemo, bom pa samo na hitro še omenil, da sva tale podcast z Majkom snemala tik pred tekmo z Knicksi. To tekmo so potem Mavericksi precej zanesljivo dobili, podobno je bilo tudi potem na naslednji tekmi, igrali so 2 tekmi v 2 večerih. To je bila že 4. zaporedna zmaga Mavericksov, ki v zadnjem času po tistih težavah s Covidom, o katerih sva tudi seveda govorila z Majkom, igrajo precej bolje, vendar seveda apetiti so visoki, ko imaš v moštvu Luko Dončića. To velja tudi za vse navijače in zaradi tega kljub tej boljši igri še vedno nekako nad moštvom v zraku visi to veliko vprašanje, kdaj se bodo pa lahko resno borili za naslov. In zato tudi zadovoljstvo navijačev ob zmagah, po zmagah ni tako veliko, kot bi morda lahko bilo, kar je pa tudi Mike poudaril v tem podkastu, zato pa zdaj res, da ne bom zgubljal časa, gremo kar veselo na delo. I'm joined today by Mike Bibins. Mike, thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Hvala. Thank you for the invite.
You said you weren't going to do that.
Caught you off guard with it.
Yeah, well, Slovenian listeners will definitely appreciate it. And hvala for taking the time to join me today. Mike is a great follow on Twitter. You can find him at Bibs Corner, BIBS Corner. And he also has a few podcasts about the Mavs. And I heard you discuss other topics too. You can find all of his content on bibscorner.com. And podcasts I mentioned, the Mavs Outsiders podcast is the main one, and also Bibs Corner podcast, which you can find everywhere where you listen to your podcasts on all the major platforms. So again, Mike, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. And we're talking right before Mavs play the Knicks tonight, so maybe I should start by asking you for your predictions for this game. But I really wanted to also get your general perspective on this season and the future of this Mavs team. So since we don't have a lot of time before the game starts, I wanted to start this pod by asking you how many players, and it's a big question to start with, but I think it's a good sort of starting point. How many players who are currently on Mavs roster do you think will still be on the roster when Mavs win another championship? And we all hope and think it's a question of when, not a question of if.
Man, that's a really tough question.
Yeah.
I think for me that you have to first pin down the timeline. So I would say the earliest I would expect us to even be competing for a championship is maybe 2 to 3 years from now. So realistically, I'll say win a championship in 5 years. So then I have to look at who on the roster kind of fits that timeline. I think we could be on the back end of Tim Hardaway Jr. still at that point. Luka for sure, definitely on the roster. I don't think that's a question. We're not
going to... Let's hope Mavs don't waste Luka and win a championship with him. That would be a tragedy if that doesn't happen.
Right. So let's go ahead and pin him down. I definitely want Luka to be here in 5 years. But then when you look at the rest of the roster, most of the guys that really play minutes are kind of already in their prime years. And in 5 years, they're going to be coming out of that. They're going to be like on the downside of their career. Like I mentioned, Tim Hardaway being 29, like he'll be 34 at that point. He may just be a shooter, which could be valuable, but he will have a much smaller role. You might have noticed I kind of skipped over a certain name, and that name being Kristaps.
Yeah.
I don't think Kristaps will be here in 5 years.
Interesting. Well, we have to stop then here at KP first. You don't think he'll be here in 5 years? Do you think he'll be here till the end of his current contract?
To be honest, it's going to go one of two ways, in my opinion, because I don't think he's happy with the way he's used, and I don't think he's happy being in Luka's spotlight, or in his shadow, I should say. I think that when he came here, he expected more of a tandem situation where they're not necessarily equals, but at least closer to equals than what they appear to be right now.
1A, 1B sort of situation, probably.
Exactly. And even when you look at the bubble last year, that's kind of what it was. Like they were both having big games. You know, Luka was I think they were both all bubble first team. And KP was averaging like 30 points a game or something ridiculous. Luka was also averaging 30. Like they looked like a big tandem. Like everybody was praising both of them. But then KP gets hurt. Then he's out for a few weeks to start the season. And Luka's dominating. And now he's coming back in, trying to fit into the team, fit in with Luka. And you can just see some of the awkwardness between them on the court. And I just don't think it's conducive to KP sticking around. So, he has 2 more years on his contract after this year. I think that if he voices his displeasure, there's a possibility we end up trading him in one of the next 2 years. And if we don't trade him, I could definitely see him simply walking on us after his contract is up.
Do you see as the main problem the desire of KP for a bigger role on the team, or do you see also some problems on the court, or do you see them as a fit on the court and the main problem being chemistry issues, which I also noticed this season, and I also talked with Kirk about this. KP is visibly more frustrated in certain situations compared to last season, showing more emotion, displeasure in certain situations, being angry at times. Is that the main issue, or do you see some on-the-court issues as well?
I think it's a combination of the two, and I think that they're related as well. You know, I think when KP got here, he was of the mindset that he didn't really want to play a five. Of course, he's embraced that role of being the center, and offensively, it's worked pretty well for us. Defensively, the results have kind of been mixed. But you get a guy to play out of position as far as what he thinks he wants to do. Then he also has to deal with the idea that he's never going to be as good as Luka. Then you add all the pressure from the fans for him to perform every night, when he's having to do things that he didn't expect to have to do, and the injury bug looming over his head. Like, I think it's just a lot of different pressures on him. And when he can't perform the same way every night, and when he gets held out of games, because I don't think he's choosing to be held out of games, but that's the decision the team has made, it's all adding up to a lot of frustration and a lot of tension that he has towards probably the organization.
It certainly seems like that, but of course, for Mavs to get something back for KP, he has to be at least close to that bubble KP. But if he's playing like bubble KP, then he does a lot of things, not just very well for the Mavs, but extremely well. Also on defense, where, like you mentioned, he's been lackluster this season. He hasn't been close to KP defensively that he was last season. Do you see any good trade options for KP, or who would you like to see Mavs trade KP for? That's, of course, realistic.
Right. So, you know, and I know you kind of talked about it with Kirk when you had him on. My dream scenario was the Magic keep Vucevic, because he has 2 years on his contract as well. KP stays healthy this year. And going into next year, the Magic, if they have another down year, they would be looking to trade Vucevic. They don't have as much leverage with him being in the last, couple of years of his contract. And we can trade KP in a Vucevic deal, because I feel like Vucevic does a lot more. He's comfortable scoring at all three levels, where KP's more comfortable shooting jump shots from the outside. He can back to the basket. He can roll. He can pop. And he rebounds. Like, it's not a job for him to rebound. Like, he just does it. He's in the right spots. He's boxing out, things like that. I feel like he's a much better complement to Luka, and he's easier to build around. And I think that's the main problem with KP, is like finding a guy to play next to him that makes sense.
I completely agree with you, and it would have been great if we're talking dream scenarios, if somehow Mavs did a mega trade with the Magic and got, besides Vucevic, Gordon also, and then they have a team, then they have a squad, then they have a contender, in my opinion, and that probably would have been something you would have liked to.
So, with that said, with him being traded to the Bulls, I was very devastated in that moment. Obviously happy for the Bulls, because they did what they had to do to make their star happy in Levine. But now it's like, who do I go after for Luka? And realistically, I don't know that there is any particular player that's going to be in that position. You could maybe say Anthony Davis, if LeBron is, in a couple of years kind of worn down. Maybe he wants to get out of there. But there's a huge gap in the talent, and all the guys that I would want are on contending type teams already.
We're talking free agency and possible trades here. Of course, options do seem, especially in the next free agency when we're talking the biggest names, seem pretty limited next summer. And we started by talking about the players who might be on the roster when Mavs win another championship, and we stopped at KP right away after Tim Hardaway Jr. But what about the other guys, the core of this team? Do you see the Mavs already having at least 3, 4, 5 players who could be considered a core of a contender besides another piece or two? If it's a big piece, of course, it could be just one.
So here's what I'll say on that, because I gave 2 timelines. I gave like 3 years is the quickest I see us being able to say we're a contender. 5 years is when I predict the championship. So in 3 years, I do think Maxey could still be a good piece on a contending team, in a smaller role than he's having to play this year. But I could definitely see Maxey being there. I could definitely see Tim Hardaway Jr. being there. The young guys, like, say, Josh Green, for example, in 3 years, I don't think he's ready to be a significant piece on a contending team. But in 5, I think he could.
Here it's also hard to say anything because we haven't really seen him play. So I'd like to ask you here, because you mentioned Green, Carlisle's attitude towards rookies. Would you like in general for Carlisle to play the rookies more? Because on the other hand, Carlisle also has to win. And it does seem like he goes for the veterans every time when the game is not, a blowout. So,
and I think this is a part of this is a big part of why I think he shouldn't be the coach of a young team. I think having Luka allows him to be the way he is and only play veterans because Luka's just extraordinary for his age. But the truth of the matter is we are a young team and we're not in position to contend. So when you have a team full of, when you bring in 3 or 4 young guys you drafted four young guys in their lower 20s, you should be giving them spot minutes here and there just to show what they have. And even when we were playing Josh Green early in the season, they were telling him to sit in the corner and do nothing. And it's like, what's even the point of that? So now you're going in, you're being told, I don't want you to try things. And so you don't. And so then people see you not doing anything and they say, oh, is he not capable? And that's really not the truth of the matter. I did watch a lot of what he did in the bubble. And he just looked like a completely different player. They were letting him operate as a pick and roll ball handler. I think he had a couple of big assist games. He had almost a triple double in a couple games with like 16 points. Like, he could be a really dynamic player for us. And the thing for me with Josh Green is, I look at Dorian Finney-Smith play almost 40 minutes a night. I look at when guys were out, Wes Iwundu was playing 20 minutes. And you can't convince me that those guys are that much better than Josh Green, that he can't get 10 minutes, consistent minutes a night, playing their roles and so they're not as stretched as thin. So that then when you get to the playoffs, you can play them 40 minutes. But during the regular season, Josh Green should be able to have some of those minutes to get comfortable. And maybe one night he will actually get a chance to explode. But when he's playing 1 minute here, 2 minutes there, how is he supposed to develop? And I feel like Carlisle's hurting himself with that.
You said you don't think Carlisle is the right coach for a young team. Do you think, and that is quite a bombshell, the Mavs need a coaching change too? Do they perhaps have to look somewhere else? And that doesn't really seem currently plausible. Probably it would take a while before the front office decides to do something like that. But in your opinion, is that something they should do?
So I see myself as being a sort of I don't want to say a visionary, but kind of trying to see the big picture and think outside of what I know is probably going to happen. So Mark Cuban has only fired one coach since he's been the owner. And that was pretty much because Dirk requested it. Avery Johnson, after 2007, when we lost in the first round, that was pretty much it. That's the only time Mark Cuban has fired a coach.
And Dirk requested that? I didn't know that. That was Dirk's wish?
Yes. So apparently behind the scenes, it's like known that Dirk complained about Avery Johnson's coaching style and approach. And obviously with the results of what happened in the playoffs that year, it was probably easy for Mark Cuban to make that call. If your star's not happy, plus you get embarrassed in the playoffs, it's easy to go ahead and let that coach go. Now, in this situation, I don't think Luka's going to go to Mark Cuban and complain about Rick Carlisle. And Luka's the only one that has that power that Dirk would have had back then. And Carlisle is a good coach. He's a really, really good coach, one of the best in the league. I will never say that he is not. I thought we had a big opportunity to kind of shift the direction of the club last year because a lot of the contending teams, the 76ers, the Pacers, the teams that have all-stars on them, fired their coaches. And I thought, thinking outside the box, because I've seen it done before, the Celtics traded Doc Rivers to the Clippers. I thought, if we trade Rick Carlisle to one of these contending teams right now, maybe we could have gotten Miles Turner from the Pacers or something like that, and then promote one of our assistants. Silas left and is now the coach of the Rockets. Mosley got some interviews with other teams. Like, we have young assistants. I thought it was a good opportunity to get Luka a young coach that isn't already a Hall of Famer, that is going to live and die every night with him, because Luka's an emotional player and Rick is just way too, it seems like he's not at the same level his players are. And, he doesn't have to live and die with every game, because, again, his Hall of Fame ticket is punched at the end of the day.
Interesting. And Luka does seem to have a great relationship with Coach Mosley. I do notice they seem to communicate a lot on the bench, maybe even more, at least when I watch timeouts on League Pass. It seems like Luka talks more to Mosley than he does to Carlisle. But Carlisle is, I don't know where do you rank him, but definitely among top 10 coaches in the NBA right now.
I'd say top 5 even.
Top 5, yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with you. I mean, he is a great coach, so it's more of a personality issue and getting a coach who could grow with a team, grow with Luka. And interesting thing you mentioned, live and die with every game like Luka does, and it's true. Luka is a very emotional player, and one of those players that I think hates losing more than he loves winning. I mean, losing really gets to him. And this front office is, the way they're load managing games, not going all out in every game, that's probably not just a coaching issue. It's also on the front office in some part. So do you think there should be some changes in front office as well? Do you think Mavs just need to sort of start building from the ground up? So
you got to make me sound like a bad guy out here, but no, but I embrace that role. Because there's way too much happiness with mediocrity that we've been dealing with for 10 years now on this team. Like I said, Mark Cuban doesn't like firing people. He's gotten very, very close, tight bonds with his coach, Rick Carlisle, who's been there 13 years, the tie for the second longest tenured coach in the NBA. Donnie's been there forever, like pretty much since, he took over the team. And, I feel like there's way too much familiarity between the three. There's no excitement. There's no fun. The team is run very much like a business, basically. It's not run like a basketball team in my eyes. Like, when people look at the Dallas Mavericks, this is part of why we can't get free agents. They don't look at it as like a fun destination to come play basketball. It's a business decision. There's no taxes in Dallas, so you get more of your money on your contract. Dallas isn't really a contender right now, so it's a good place for a guy who's maybe trying to get to his next big contract to come show what he can do. And culturally, we kind of talked about this before we started, but culturally, I think there's issues with, there was the scandal with the sexual harassment a couple of years ago. There was Mark Cuban's insensitive comments about American basketball culture. that made it sound like he was maybe questioning the way black players are developed in America. And so when you add all of these things together, when you have a coach who isn't friendly, who is not a player's coach, when you have a GM that feels like he's just attached to the owner, he's not willing to push against the owner and push for things and make things happen, and you have an owner that seems like he's maybe out of touch with today's players, like you're gonna stay in the middle like we've done forever. Having Luka is the only reason that we are not a bottom feeder team.
And of course, Luka can win a championship by himself. Are you optimistic, or how optimistic are you? You mentioned the timeline, 3 to 5 years, but if there aren't any changes as far as coaching goes, as far as front office, how optimistic are you? Do you still see Mavs winning a championship in 3 to 5 years without any changes, coaching or otherwise?
Quite honestly, no, not at all. And I think that if neither of those things happens, I think Luka very well could be walking out the door at that point, because 5 years, I think, is when his second contract would end. And if we haven't taken the necessary steps to build around him, because our GM isn't willing to do things and our owner is too smart for his own good, and the culture hasn't changed, and we can't lure people to come here. People don't say, I want to go to Dallas like they do for LA or those other teams. Then why would Luka stay?
Yeah, if we see the Giannis scenario on the Bucks, if that scenario sort of happens with the Mavs, it's hard to envision Luka staying on a team if he doesn't at least get to the finals in the next 5 years. Maybe I see like if he sees a chance of actually winning, sees a road to the finals, a concrete road to the finals, then maybe that changes the situation, even if he doesn't win a ring in that time period. But if Mavs don't even make the finals during that time, and like Giannis sort of have a really a bad ending to their playoff run a couple of times in a row. Yeah, a guy like Luka, who's used to winning at every level, at every age, I mean, he hates to lose so much. I just can't see him losing in playoffs the way the Bucks did for the past couple of seasons, and then signing an extension after that. I mean, yeah, the clock is ticking. We can agree on that.
So they just announced that Jamal Mosley is going to coach the team tonight. Because Rick Carlisle had a positive test for COVID.
Oh.
He's vaccinated, so it probably won't be too bad. But
interesting. So, yeah, you're breaking news here. You know that he is vaccinated? That was reported?
Yes, that was reported. He got the vaccine way back there, apparently.
Oh, good. So hopefully he'll be okay. But that does mean that Coach Mosley will probably be the head coach in the next, few games at least, I imagine. And that might actually be interesting to watch. Just observe how he connects with the players and Luka and KP. And this is going to be interesting. And, of course, we both hope Carlisle will be okay and fine. But that just shows how unpredictable this season was. Anything can happen. And we wanted to touch on the second part of the season too, and what do you expect from the team during the second part of the season? Where do you see them finishing the season, and where would you like to see them finishing the season if there's a disconnect between those two?
So actually, I did want to finish one other piece of that Luka Giannis comparison.
Yeah, sure.
I think that you and Kirk Talk touched on that too, but I agree with everything that you guys said about Luka and Giannis not being the same guys, where Luka, like you said, comes from a winning background and history and a family that never had to really struggle, to where he's not going to have that same loyalty that Giannis or Dirk had, where he's like a fish out of water when he landed in America and didn't have any expectations for what his career would be. Like, they're at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Every time I get the opportunity, I always tell the story about how Giannis got his first game check and sent every single dollar to his family back in Greece, and had no money. And a fan gave him a ride to his first game. Like, that type of loyal, like, that's why he's loyal to Milwaukee. Like, his father passed away in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and that's why everybody loves Giannis.
So yeah, I agree. Luka, that doesn't have any reason to be loyal after, if we haven't done anything and after his second contract is up. But going to this year, I've been watching the standings very closely, and we're kind of really, really stuck in that 7 seed. The path to getting out of the play-in is a very difficult path when you look at it, because the Blazers and Nuggets are the Blazers should be behind us right now. The fact that they're ahead of us still, despite being down 2 starters for as long as they were, is a testament, first of all, to how good Dame Lillard is, but just how good that team is, because now they're getting back Nurkic. He's on a minutes limit right now, but he's getting back healthy. McCollum is back now. They made the trade now for Norman Powell. Like, they're going to get better than they have been. And if they were already better than us, then catching up 3.5 games is going to be very difficult. Same thing kind of with the Nuggets. They're already ahead of us. They added Aaron Gordon. They're going to get better going forward. The Lakers are actually tied with the Nuggets right now, and they are down their 2 big guys in LeBron and AD. So really, I think that's the team we have the best chance of catching, strangely enough. And that could line us up for a playoff matchup with the Nuggets or the Blazers. Interestingly enough, in my preseason predictions, I actually had us finishing 4 or 5 and facing the Blazers in the first round in a 4-5 matchup. And before the season, I said that my hope was that if that occurs, if we end up in that 4-5 spot and we play against the Blazers, I would be happy if we pushed that series to 6 or 7, even if we lost.
What about the Nuggets? Which series would you prefer, Blazers or Nuggets?
So that's kind of like, would you rather be stabbed or would you rather choked? Like, yeah. Both of them have MVP candidates. I'm sure both series would be incredibly fun to watch. Just based on the way we play against both teams, I probably would prefer the Nuggets, honestly. And it's just because, the dynamic between Luka and Jokic, I think that they are great friends, and you can only imagine how that kind of boosts the competitive levels between the two. And as I guess the top 2 Euros in the league right now, like, I'm sure that would be just an amazing series to watch. And again, I think we have a better shot against them than I do with the Blazers.
Yeah, well, Giannis, Luka, and Jokic are the 3 main Euros, and also 3 MVP candidates. But we can talk about that too at the end. I just wanted to touch on the playoffs a little bit more. You mentioned you wouldn't be terribly disappointed if Mavs went out against the Blazers in a good competitive series. Is that something you would be satisfied with in general, no matter who they go out against in the first round, depending on the performance?
Yeah. So my dream would be, we take a step forward, we get to the second round. But just realistically, based on how we've played, and again, I said this before the season, so it's not like anything has changed on this. I would be happy with a good competitive first round series. Like, even if we're stuck in the 7 spot and we end up against the Suns or whoever, a good competitive 6-7 game series. And the key for me is KP being healthy at the end of that series. And that to me still is a step forward. Last year, it kind of felt like we didn't go out on our feet, if you will. Like, we went out and we were able to blame our circumstances for losing. I want us to get a good competitive series, lose with everybody healthy at the end of the series at worst, and then be able to regroup coming into the new season with a fully healthy roster, with KP being able to feel like he did what he could do and figuring out what he needs to change. Luka doing the same, and like, you know, being able to go into an off season at a bare minimum, knowing what we need to fix.
Yeah, it would be really nice to get a full healthy season from this roster, from all the main guys, get a full year of guys playing healthy and playing together, and see where this team actually is and how much they can grow if they're healthy an entire season, which of course hasn't been the case for the past 2 years. We mentioned Jokic, Dame, Giannis, Luka, the main MVP candidates, so I wanted to sort of finish up on the MVP debate. Who do you see right now as the main MVP candidates, and can Luka sort of get his name in the top 3 by the end of the season? Maybe higher. I don't know. How much of a chance are you giving him? Who's your top guy right now?
I think right now the top 2, it's Luke. It's not Luka. Giannis. Not Giannis. I'm looking at like teams and throwing myself off.
Yeah.
It's Jokic and Damian Lillard are my 2 favorites. It's hard for me to get behind the whole James Harden thing just because of how loaded that team is. Embiid was a strong candidate, but, you know, he hasn't played in a little while, so it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind situation. Giannis probably can't get in there unless the Bucks get back to first place. So then you have to look at the ridiculous numbers that Jokic is putting up. If they make a run up the standings, then I think he's a lock. The same thing goes for Damian Lillard, and I'll say the same thing goes for Luka. So all those teams are bottom half of the West right now. If any one of them gets into the top half, the top 4, then whichever one finishes highest, I think has a very, very good chance of securing the MVP.
It seems the MVP race hasn't been that open, that late in the season for a while now, although Jokic, I think, has been sort of gaining a little bit of a lead. But yeah, Dame's right there, and it depends, like you said, on the standings and how much where the teams are at the end of the season. That will probably be the biggest factor.
Yeah, I think when you have it this close, it's going to come down to what were the expectations and then who exceeded them the most, basically.
Yeah, well, Mike, the game will start pretty soon if it hasn't yet. So I'll thank you again for taking the time to talk to me. Hope you'll be able to join me again sometime if you can find the time.
Of course.
Thank you, and yeah, we'll talk again, and hopefully Mavs win tonight and go on a bit of a win streak and make things interesting. The West is already this season hasn't been interesting enough. Yeah.
Interesting in a good way, because I don't know if it's been a good way so far.
Exactly, and yeah, well, we can end on this really good point. Yeah, so thanks again, Mike, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Most definitely, we'll definitely do it again.
Yeah, thanks.
Take it easy.
You too. Bye.
Bye.